I think that's been a theme of a lot of my life is do I have to do this? And like it's funny, you can almost put the astrology lens, like I'm a Capricorn and they like the stereotype of Capricorns is that they're workaholics. And I'm like, no, 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 you guys got it all wrong. We want excellence, but we actually want to minimize what we have to do. We want to like be efficient and we want to be really targeted about, is this actually worthwhile? I don't want to just go through the motions because that's what everybody else is doing. I want to know why. I
Mm-hmm.
want to know whether I agree with these things that you're saying are important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of been my philosophy with regard to school, with, nutrition, parenting, and of course, birth.
Welcome, welcome to all of you beautiful souls tuning in today to the Heart of the Soul podcast as Earthing Nova on YouTube. My name is Amana, and I am so happy that you're here. This is a space where we remember what it means to be wild women walking upon this earth, navigating the ebbs and flows of change, honoring each other's differences, and connecting about that which unites us. Together, we practice using our voices in the ancient ritual of storytelling, sharing our stories of birth, life, and death, and celebrating how we and they change across time. I hope that soaking in these stories will leave you feeling inspired, connected, and more alive in your own beautiful body and unique life. So today I have an episode that I recorded with a virtual friend of mine, Krystal Trammell. It was recorded on November 17th, 2022. And we recorded it in a way that we can each use it on our own platform. So that's why I'm doing this little intro of her now. Krystal is an intuitive, author, creative, mama of 5, and birth keeper. And we chat about learning outside of colonized schooling, also known as homeschooling, unschooling, or self-directed learning. We share stories of birth, death, layers of sovereignty, being curious adults, spirituality, and so much more. It was a really fun episode to record with her, so I hope that you enjoy it. Yes. Okay. So yeah, this is fun. We're doing something a little different today. Yeah. Krystal and I met on the Freebirth Society membership.
Yep. How long have you been in there?
I've been there for, I guess, over a year. I'm in my second year in the membership because, yeah, I know the second renewal came through.
Yeah. I'm relatively new to being in the membership, but I was part of the original Facebook group back in the day.
Yeah.
And wanted to join all this time and finally got it together.
Fun.
But yeah, it's taken me a bit, but yeah, I'm really loving the quality of people in there, and just the conversations seem to be just so much more nourishing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I appreciate that it's off of the mainstream social media, because I actually am not engaged in Instagram or Facebook for the last couple of years. So I do have a couple of mighty networks that I'm a part of, including this Freebirth Society one. And yeah, there's so many offerings in there, and it's amazing. Group of women.
Yeah. It's a good way to reclaim our time, I think. I left Facebook probably over a year ago. I still have a presence on there because I manage people's accounts for I do marketing social stuff for a couple of friends. And but I really I don't go there and consume content anymore. And that was a big shift. And I still have an Instagram because I tried to give it up, and then I just decided, well, that's the one place I'll hang out.
Yeah. I mean, I had a real reckoning with it because I have businesses, and so then it's
you gotta speak in code a lot.
Everyone's you have to have social media if you have a business, and I'm do I have to though? Do I really have to? just kind of like, do I really have to go to the hospital? Like, actually, I don't
Exactly.
have to. I mean, yeah, maybe my path to like reaching my clientele will be different and maybe take longer, to like
Yeah.
build an audience. And yet I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I think that's been a theme of a lot of my life is do I have to do this? And like it's funny, you can almost put the astrology lens, like I'm a Capricorn and they like the stereotype of Capricorns is that they're workaholics. And I'm like, no, 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 you guys got it all wrong. We want excellence, but we actually want to minimize what we have to do. We want to like be efficient and we want to be really targeted about, is this actually worthwhile? I don't want to just go through the motions because that's what everybody else is doing. I want to know why. I
Mm-hmm.
want to know whether I agree with these things that you're saying are important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of been my philosophy with regard to school, with, nutrition, parenting, and of course, birth. And yeah, so backstory, I have 5 kiddos and I've had 2 hospital births. One was great, one was terrible. And then I had a birth center birth, a home birth with midwives, and my fabulous free birth, which was 11 years ago tomorrow. So
Wow.
was that was quite a journey to get. And I feel like in some ways I'm still processing, like looking back at my now 13-year-old son's birth.
Mm-hmm.
Midwives, it was my first home birth. Like I was high on accomplishment of like I finally did the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so much more amazing than I thought it was. But now having that perspective of looking back, I'm like, man, there were still places where I gave up my autonomy when I totally didn't have to. And
Mm-hmm.
places where like I framed it as, or things were framed for me as, well, you've got to do this and this and this. And it didn't even occur to me to ask why, because it came from the filter of like, well, these are the midwives and it's home birth, it's different. And so I'm still kind of figuring out how to I'm still shifting my perspective as time goes on, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if I was having a baby today, I think I would be so much more empowered, autonomous, like sure of myself, grounded in my femininity and my awareness of what my body is capable of. But we are where we are, and that's not where I was 10 plus years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. I
So
mean, it's so interesting how our stories kind of shift and change as we like, as time passes. The way that I tell like my son's birth now is different than what the way that I told it like a few years ago. And
exactly. And I
um
think we are the stories we tell, right? Like
Mhm.
we're from a quantum perspective, we're changing the way the past impacts us as we tell about it in present. And that's like there's some medicine in being able to look back and change our perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And you said you grew up in a family that was not like highly medicalized. That your mother was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She
tell me
was
more.
she was so my mom was also very, very book smart. She would not think this of herself, but she was well educated. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
she did not perceive herself as well educated, but she was amazingly well educated. I feel like I went into kindergarten as a child with like a 5th grade education, and this is with just the way that she raised me. I'm an only child of only children. That's why I had such a big family, right? I had to make my own
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
But my mom was so devoted to whatever she thought was important. And so like when it came to her health, when it came to my health, she was very much like, okay, the doctor says. And so she was very, expert worshiping model.
Mhm.
But then she did her own research and wanted to have these respectful conversations. And I saw her be shut down all the time. We'd go to the doctor and she'd want to like, she'd have books with bookmarks and like notes and try to come and have a real conversation with the doctors. And they would be like, yeah, this is like a 5-minute appointment and I'm not interested in what you have to say. And that was really, it was interesting to me to see that interplay between this, so-called enshrined expert who was being so dismissive of my mother, who really had, some key points that she wanted to discuss. And it's like they weren't even given a voice about it. And so I guess I was skeptical at a pretty young age because of seeing that interplay. And And so yeah, so my first baby, I was like, oh God, pregnant means doctors. I can't do this. I need to figure out there's got to be something. Women didn't used to give birth with men, with strangers, right? There's got to be another way. And so like I figured out that there was midwifery, and I found a birth center, and I did have a birth center birth with midwives for my first baby. And I mean, there were things that I look back now and it's like, well, but pretty fantastic birth for being 18 and not knowing what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. Sorry, I think I went off on a tangent. Yeah, the but so just being encouraged to look into our health from a more like self-responsibility perspective. So I became a vegetarian at 14, or rather I tried and failed. I realized I could not, in fact, live off of cucumbers and popcorn, and I needed to expand my picky eater tendencies a little bit. So, like, I tried to go vegan at first, and then I was like, "Oh, that's not working." But then, so I went vegetarian at 14. Then I was vegan from like 20 to 25,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, in total, I was vegetarian for like 17 years, and I was gluten free for a bunch of those years, and just looking into all these permutations of um because it used to be vegetarian was going counterculture, right? Now
Mm-hmm.
vegetarian is the culture, and
Yes.
it's counterculture to eat meat, and so it's like
Yes.
I'm always swimming upstream.
Yeah.
i'm always uh I'm
Yeah.
always on not going the way that everybody else is going. Now that everybody else is like jumping on the vegan bandwagon, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going the other way now.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting how everything can be sort of like intertwined too with like the systems. Like, I feel like for me, like unraveling like the medical system then also led to this like unraveling of the education system
Yeah.
for me. I don't know your story of like how you like came into
Oh,
the unschooling or self-directed learning, self-directed education. But like
yeah.
for me, it was like, yeah, after I sort of unraveled the medical thing and then I'm like raising my babies and I'm like, no, I don't want to like send them off to school to be with strangers all day. Like I have waited my whole life to have, I've wanted to be
Yeah.
a mom my whole life and I want to live life with them. And
I
like,
love that.
and reflecting on my own education, I'm like, they taught us things that aren't even true or real. Like, it
Yeah.
it didn't
The
set me up
Pythagorean
for
theorem does
life.
not help.
They didn't set me up to learn to know how to like run my own business or finances. Like you don't learn any of or to grow my own food. Like they don't
Oh,
didn't teach me
absolutely.
any of those practical skills. And so I feel like I am also like becoming this like free person as I am creating my own businesses and
Yeah,
also want my children to be able to like create that kind of life for themselves if they choose that path.
for sure. Yeah. There's levels of sovereignty that you realize that were like they're 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 kept from us because it makes so much more sense if people are just, homogenous and predictable, and they do what they're told, and they buy what we want them to buy, and all of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, my your kiddos are how old?
5 and 2.
Okay, so you're still on the early end of this. So
Yes.
you're in that beautiful space where nobody can even criticize you about your school choices,
I
really,
mean,
because they're not school age.
people still do because
Oh, of course
most
they
kids
do.
are in school at 3, most
Oh, I
people
know, I'm
because
joking, but
like I know, but yeah, because they want I mean, it's colonized school because they want the kids to be in school so the parents can go work 9 to 5 jobs and like bust
exactly.
their asses and not be with their family and so that's like it's childcare and
Yeah,
indoctrination so that kids can know that they so that they can grow up and go to a 9 to 5 and be told when to eat, when to sleep, what to learn, what to do.
exactly.
Like,
And
ooh,
then homework that even follows them home.
yeah,
Why? You've got them for
gross.
how many hours a day? You can't teach them
Yeah,
everything? No.
yeah, ridiculous. Yeah, I would love to hear how what your path was into this unschooling since you have kids. So, this big age range, you've been doing it for so long and yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you're gonna laugh. So I was one of those gifted kids in the 80s. I was like, labeled as like, oh, they wanted to, I think they approached my parents twice about, you should skip a grade, she should, she needs to be somewhere more advanced. My parents didn't let me skip grades because they were worried about socialization. The funny thing is, socialization was literally the worst thing about school. I hated it so much. So people think when I say that I had a baby at 18, I dropped out because I had a baby. No, I actually dropped out a year before I was pregnant, because I hated school so much. I was looking into I was looking into home, like I don't even know why. Looking back, I don't remember what the connect was. But there was they used to have those books were popular, and it was like The Idiot's Guide to, and they had a million of them and they came out, right? And we're book people. My mom was a book person, I'm a book person. And so my mom would just like buy books, and she bought The Idiot's Guide to Homeschooling. I wasn't pregnant, like I don't know. I don't know why this book entered my reality when I was like 16, 17. And I was reading it and I was like, this is what I want. This is what I want to do. And if I ever have children, I'm never going to make them go to school. I'm going to figure out a way to like give them their choice, because I hated school so much. I was bored. I was just, we're doing the same thing all the time. And I was always the one that was like the teacher's pet, and being encouraged to like help tutor the other students to make it easier on the teacher. And I was just like, this is so dumb and I hate it. I don't want to do this. I want to go home where I can do the cool stuff that I'm interested in and read the books I want to read. And, so that's kind of, I was already looking at the ramifications of homeschooling when I was a teenager. And then when I got pregnant, I was like, oh, well, I need to learn about this for real now, because I want to make sure that I don't have to send my kiddo to school. I was reading John Taylor Gatto's work when I was like 18, 19, when I was a brand new mom. And I remember calling my mom on the landline phones and just with tears pouring down my face and trying to read her passages from John Taylor Gatto, because this was like a spiritual experience for me. He described so well what was wrong with public school and how it felt to me. And I remember her like, kind of, smiling and nodding politely and being like, honey, I just don't get it. Like, I see that you're really moved by this, but I don't understand. And I'm like, well, okay, but I need you to know that this is what's behind it when I say I'm not sending my kid to school. And, but of course that played into, there's that whole, if you're going to work, it's awfully hard to homeschool. And so I was very, very focused on my mothering and not really focused on making money or having, my own job, my own autonomy when I was younger. And then also I was 18. I didn't exactly pick a great partner. And so when I was 25, I got divorced and I had 2 little kids, and I had like the job skills and life skills of a 16-year-old, more or less, except in the realm of like household and mothering. And so that was kind of a crash and burn, but and I got through divorce and I met my new husband. And I mean, I guess he's not so new now. We've been together for a while. but I managed to, for the most part, keep my kiddos out of school. My oldest son went to public school for 6 weeks. His dad took him away from me and put him in school against our will. And 6 weeks later, he was like, so are you still willing to homeschool? They're saying that he needs all these things, and like they want to get him evaluated for ADHD and put him on medication and all these things. And I was just like, yes, I will homeschool him. Like whatever it takes. Yes.
Yeah.
Give my baby back to me and let me do things my way, please. And so yeah, we that's that's how I ended up on that homeschool journey. And it's been, definitely ups and downs and craziness. I remember going back to college, and then my husband had some chronic illness stuff going on, and life was really just hard. And it felt like I had to figure out, I had to figure out a way to make money and to be there for my kids. And I remember thinking like, I've got to put them in school. And so again, my 2 oldest, they went to school for like 3 months. And I remember having this big reckoning with, I'm just going to be living a different lifestyle than the rest of what society says is acceptable, because I care about this so much. I am willing to cut my losses in all the other areas because homeschooling is my top priority.
Yeah, it's
I
one of
want
your
my
core
kids.
values. Yeah.
It was a core value moment for me, and I realized like I'm just gonna have to accept the judgment of everybody else in my world that's telling me to get a job and earn more money, or like, be focused on my degree and my, quote unquote career. And I'm like, no, if I mess up my kids and I feel like school is not a good fit for them, especially my oldest son, he's in college now, and he went and got diagnosed, right? Like 30-minute appointment now, yes, he has ADHD, it's official. So he gets these accommodations for college, which are really helpful and convenient for him. But I mean, if I'm I feel like I'm a little bit quirky. My mom was a little bit quirky. Like, it's a
Yeah.
family thing. We're all a little bit, I mean, if
Yeah.
I were gonna go pursue a diagnosis, I could probably get one. But
Right.
I'm not
Not
interested in that.
interested in that.
I'd
Yeah.
rather just do what I need to do in my life to make things make sense to me. And a huge part of that is not sending my kids to a homogenation institution that's going to try to turn them into little, round pegs.
Sheep. Yeah.
I'm not into that.
No. When you started schooling them at home, like did you do the like structured homeschooling, basically like bring the school to your home, or were you
Oh,
more
I tried.
free
I
about
tried all the
it, or
things.
like, yeah.
Well, two two things worked in my favor in terms of saving us from that. One is that I'm really scattered and disorganized.
Yeah.
And two is that I was broke.
Mm-hmm.
Straight up, that was a gift. Like, I get, like, at the time I was really upset, like, it was a real challenge in a lot of ways, but I definitely view it as a gift that I had to be super creative on the financial front. I could not just buy an out of the box curriculum and like do the thing.
Right.
I couldn't afford it. So I was like, okay, what's free? What can I get at the library? What kind of free resources are there? Let's go outside, and it's going to be a nature lesson in terms of whatever I notice and whatever I can tell them about. And then, you know, being a curious person is, I feel like, critical for being a good uh, home educating parent, right? If you're trying to like give this top down look at, make the kids study out of books and do these worksheets and da-da-da, but you're not reading for pleasure,
Mhm.
you're not curious about the
Right.
world, you're not going outside and like marveling at all the cool things there are to
Mhm.
see alongside them, they're gonna think there's no point, and they're gonna perceive it as like, just more indoctrination, right?
Mhm.
So I feel like that's, if you're not willing to like get your hands dirty and play and get messy and leave things open-ended, you're missing some critical stuff, you
Yeah.
know? It's
Yeah.
hard to put it on a syllabus, but it's critical stuff.
Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, it's so interesting how there's this like perception that learning only happens in school. Like when I tell people that I'm not putting my kids in school, they're like, well, how are they
Oh,
gonna learn? And I'm like, they learn every day, all day long. Like
yeah.
there's learning doesn't only happen in school.
I
Um,
think learning is what we do as humans. I think people
yeah.
forget that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's literally, if it's almost impossible for us to not be curious
Mm-hmm.
unless it's been schooled out of us,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
whole, like, one of the things I see frequently is like, if we had a school to teach babies how to walk, there would be like this epidemic of like, oh, late walking and not walking children, and like, they need aids and they need instruction. And no, it's play and it's fun and it happens.
Yes.
I wish we could see that. I mean, how do you learn anything as an adult?
Yeah, we don't have to teach them how to pee and poop like they're doing that right out of the sometimes in your womb and then
Yeah,
right
yeah.
after. Like,
It
ah,
happens.
yes. I'm curious, like how did you navigate, like, I'm curious for my own self, like
Yeah.
laws and things around schooling,
Ah,
and what
we are
are
in the great state of Texas.
and you're in
So,
Texas. So, okay, yeah,
yeah.
tell me more about that. And what did you
Texas.
choose Texas for its laws around
Oh,
schooling,
no.
or
No,
just
I was
happened
born
there?
here.
Okay.
I was born here and I hated it for a good long while. And I guess I've just made peace with that. I haven't got it together to move anywhere else. I haven't really seen enough of, um, sometimes I fantasize about just like picking up and moving to Costa Rica or something, but like, I don't know. Now I've got two adult kids that are, live on their own, and they are close enough that I also think about that. I don't necessarily want to leave. And Texas has fantastic laws in terms of medical freedom and also homeschooling. So the way that homeschooling works in Texas, you don't even have to declare anything. You literally just live your life. And at the, like for instance, you write a diploma at the end. You can create it. Like print out a nice thing on a fancy bordered piece of paper, and like it has the things, and you make your own transcripts, because Texas views homeschoolers as a private school entity. And so for us, that was like, we made a name for our homeschool, and I made up transcripts, and I wrote down all the different subject areas that were studied. For instance, when my son needed transcripts
so
to go to college.
you do have to like jump through some hoops for them like that.
That was only because my son wanted to go to college, and so the college wanted these things. And so yeah, but I mean, like for instance, my daughter's not in college yet. She's 20. She's just doing her thing, having fun. She like works a retail job and has like an online boutique, and she does digital art, and she's not interested in college yet. She's actually looking at what if she were to get a nanny certification and things like that. She's got that entrepreneurial streak, which I'm glad for. And so she hasn't needed anything. So I printed her diploma, and that's that. I mean, her job didn't even ask to see proof of high school or anything. It's just, it's a non-issue. So that's really nice. If you were, for instance, if I had a kid who was, they knew they wanted to like go to, I don't know, be in NASA or something, and they knew that they were going to go to a particular college and it needed particular, boxes ticked on paperwork, we could just draw that up as we go along, but it's all very optional. And I've always told my kids, like, college is an investment. Grants are cool. Loans, you really got to think about. Is it worth taking out loans for a job that you may or may not want, you may or may not get, and may or may not pay you enough to make it worthwhile to pay those loans back?
Totally. So, I mean, I went to college, and I mean, it was an experience. But I don't feel like the value that was paid in monetarily did I receive after.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was raised with college is the absolute non-negotiable. You must. I think I was actually 14 years old before I found out that it wasn't, in fact, illegal to not go to college. That was like how sheltered I was, and how how much it was pushed, because my parents did not go to, like, I'm the first college educated person in my family. I really am, I swear. And I'm only like it's not, my parents held it up as like the holy grail of this is what you do and then your life works financially. But of course we know that's not the case. Like, things have changed wildly in the last, I'm 41, so whatever I think if I would have gotten a degree exactly when I, if I would have done everything correctly, quote unquote, like not had a baby at 18, went to college immediately, had that degree at 22, maybe. But even then it was like, oh, but you really want a master's degree if you want to earn, money for survival. And I have 2 college degrees. They don't do anything for me. I mean, it was fun. I learned a lot of cool stuff, but nobody needs a sociologist degree. Like, the kind of jobs that are available for my degree, I would never want to do them. And I wish somebody would have told me that before I got the degree.
I'm 40. I first got a degree in sociology and then got a nursing. I love like people and the study of people and like culture stuff. But there wasn't a job for me with that degree. And then I got a nursing degree. And I mean, and there was a job for that, but only
gotta go where the money is.
But then it's a very particular job, and you can only work under other people. There's no like entrepreneurship within a nursing degree. Like, I can't create my own schedule. I can't work autonomously.
Right. And then, we all, in the last 2+ years.
And you have to do all the things that they say and get all the jobs that they want you to have. And
it's a whole thing. I know more than a few nurses that have left, and even doctors. I write for a doctor. She's a good friend of mine that I think we've worked together like 5 or 6 years now, and she left. She gave up her medical license over the craziness that
Mm-hmm.
has been the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a trip. Yeah. So yeah. Autonomy often has a cost with traditional jobs. And I want to be upfront with my kids about, this is what the world is like. If you participate, these are, maybe some trade-offs that you need to be aware of. And so, yeah, I definitely don't want to push the narrative of, college at all costs. And then what, they're going to be 200K in debt for like a music degree? Nah. Like, I don't want that for them. As much as I value music and I value learning around that, um, it can't be through the system.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Hmm. It's so
Tell me
interesting. Yeah.
Tell me more about where you're at with because your kiddos are on the flip side, like from where mine are. And what are like the challenges that you feel like you're facing with almost school age?
Well, I mean, there's like the aspect of, well, first I'm trying to like figure out, okay, when do I like legally actually have to do something? I'm in Washington State, and from what I can tell, it's not until they're 8,
Okay,
which I'm like,
that's
okay,
decent.
that gives me some time and space.
Yeah.
Um,
I know unschooling is legal in all 50 states. It's just a matter of how many hoops do you have to jump through.
right. And yeah, having to jump through hoops. But like I'm like living my values with this with them. And it's, a lot of their friends are in school. And
Mhm.
so like my son, has asked about school and like, some of the like books that we read and they like glorify
Right.
school
It's in
or
our culture.
it's in the culture. So like books
And it's
and
a marketing thing, right?
yeah.
You gotta market it to these kids, make them want it.
Yeah, want to go to school, want to get
Mhm.
on the bus and and they see the playgrounds and they're like, kids are playing on the playground. But I'm like, yeah, but they're only get to be out there for like a half an hour and the rest of the time they're sitting at a desk. Like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
it's
Like
been,
navigating the kiddos wanting to and all that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So, some conversations, just like real frank conversations with my son about what the school could look like and, the possibility of him trying it at some point if he wants to, like that
Yeah.
option. But and also like telling him why I feel, it's important for him to like be with us and why, the reasons why I don't want him indoctrinated into that system.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, that's true. I guess my kids are mostly past that kind of stage, but it's even, I think that between like 5 and 10 is also, it might be the hardest time because there's also all this societal input and like, from family, from friends. They're, oh, what grade are you in, honey? And stuff like that. And kids can get, especially, I don't know if it's culturally, society, or just, kids are just way more smart than we give them credit for, but they get anxiety around this stuff. Like we've had multiple iterations of breaking this down with them over the years. Like what they were concerned about when they were 5, 6 was
Mhm.
totally different than what they were concerned about at like 9, 10. But it's the same kind of things in terms of, oh, so you want to ride the bus? Great. So let's figure out where we can go see a school bus and they can climb around on it and sit in the seat and go, wow, there's no seat belt or whatever, like look
Yes.
out the windows or sit in the driver's seat and drive the big steering wheel, whatever. It might be enough to get it out of their system and be like, that was cool anyway. And then they're, on to the next exploration. Um, and then the feeling of being dumb or being behind, like my middleest child, she would go and see her cousin. She has a cousin that's like the same age, and I can't think of a more different approach to parenting and family and life than like what her family does, right? And
Mhm.
so that's always provided fascinating contrast for all of us, really. um and so this kid would come around and bring all of her schooled friends, and they would be like, you don't go to school. So like, what's 2 + 2? Ha 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 ha. Like, that kind of needling and jabbing. Um, and my daughter would come to me and be like, oh, I don't think I'm smart or whatever. Also, there was another layer of it, is like, we're only just now figuring out this kid has dyslexia. So she did have things that were going on, like in her mind, about that. She's like a voracious reader, but she has dyslexia, and this was her personal motivation to overcome what she felt like was, like her self-judgment was big enough that we didn't realize there was a reading problem, because she was like that motivated to overcome. And so there's, so many little moving pieces in that, right? But then being able to, like, for instance, my kids are like, oh, we're stupid, we don't know anything. And so, like, okay, well, what do you want to know? Do you want to take a look at the standardized test for grade whatever? Like, let's pull it up, let's get on the internet and look at it. And they're looking at these questions and they're like, but I mean, the answer is this, it can't be that easy. I'm like, yeah, no, it is, this is the test. And they're like, oh, okay. So it's like answering their own objections and their own kind of insecurities about being the different kid, being from the different family. Some of that is, it's just really critical to hang out with your people, to spend time with other people who are also doing life more in alignment with your values and your goals. But I think it's everywhere. School is cool, like back to school. Incidentally, we love back to school sales, because that's where I'm going to buy all their stuff for, just using whatever. And my kids are baffled. Like, you mean they have to use a specific type of pencil? I'm like, yeah, baby, you can't use a fountain pen at school. That's crazy. Okay. Like, there's all kinds of little trade-offs, right?
Yes.
And yeah, I used to say, and I used to think that, like, well, if they ask to go to school, I'll let them. And I really had to, I think that if my older kids, well, I mean, I did try school with my older kids, and I didn't put them in it with the idea of, like, I was very frank with them. I was like, we're having some family stuff going on. Like, I'm in college and daddy's sick, and this is what we're going to need to do for a minute. Please try to have fun, and don't let this impact your sense of self-worth, basically. Just try to have fun, don't disrupt it too much, enjoy the process, we'll get you home soon as we can. Like, that was how I sent them to school, literally.
Yes.
And so, the teachers would be trying to have meetings with me about, like, oh, his test scores are da 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 da, and I'm like, I don't care, and he doesn't care, and, like, it has no bearing on the fact that, like whether or not he knows this information. For instance, my daughter didn't know how to read when she was like first grade, right? And they were doing all these things because this child doesn't know how to read, and they were like partnering her up with this other kid and like helping her. And I'm like, no, she knows how to read. She's known how to read for like a year. She's just not doing it in school because she thinks this is fun. You're giving her extra attention and she's enjoying it. And I remember they thought I was crazy. We got hauled in for a parent teacher meeting, and I was like, here, baby girl, will you read this for me? And she just takes the little book and everybody's jaw dropped. They didn't believe it. But I'm like, do you not think that kids are going to be opportunistic in that setting? Yeah. Especially when they have already been raised with autonomy up to that point.
Yes.
I never made it a thing in terms of your self-worth hinges on making sure that you have these people's approval.
Right.
Anyway, I got way off topic with that one, but
no, yeah. Not. It's good. Good to hear those stories. And you were mentioning that, like, yeah, at one point you thought maybe you would allow your kids to go to school if they were choosing that, but then you shifted your perspective on that. I'm curious about that, because I'm reckoning with that. He hasn't, like,
well, and I feel like elementary is often also, I mean, maybe everything's changed so much it's unrecognizable, but at the time, I feel like elementary is a different thing than high school. And everybody's like, oh, but prom, guess what? There's homeschool proms. You know why? Homeschoolers make them. Like, and they're really fun. And it's just, whatever. There's been a homeschool prom that's been running in Austin, and that's like an hour hour 20-minute drive from me. I'm cool with
Mhm.
that. I'm gonna go and drive my kids to the prom if that's what they want to do or whatever, um if that's the thing that is important to them, just we can make it happen in other ways. And yeah, I think that I hated high school, and that was in the 90s, so like I can't imagine how much more crazy it's gotten.
Yeah.
My 15-year-old commented the other day that pretty much every friend she had as a child is now transitioned. And I'm like, what? And a lot of it is these kids fall off. We have this thriving social group when they're 5, 6, 7, 8. Every year more and more homeschoolers get sucked up into the machine of school.
Mhm.
And I get it, like there's reasons like divorce or whatever, financial challenges. But I feel like by the time that high school comes and they get sucked into that, um it's such an impactful time in their lives. And so yeah, like if my two youngest are almost 11 and 13, and if they ask me to go to school, I would say no, I'm sorry, it's not a safe place for you. I'm
Mhm.
not gonna
Mhm.
not gonna accommodate that.
Yeah.
I will accommodate all sorts of other things, but not that.
Yeah.
I think that's more just grounding into seeing my older kids' successes and ability to thrive
Mhm.
despite, and so I'm more confident in, no, this is real. I listen to a lot of mystics and mediums and things like that. And one of my favorite ones, she talks about that school is for the purpose of separating and fracturing the family system.
Yeah.
And that is like that's the prime purpose, because you can get an education anywhere,
Yes.
really. I mean,
Yeah.
especially if you are self-motivated. Oh my gosh. I just taught my 13-year-old some things about borrowing and carrying with math because he wanted to know this stuff. And he was like, so, I guess I'd be in this grade and I want to go look. So we got him set up on Khan Academy. It's like a free, online math thing.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, well, what does this mean? What does this mean? I sat down and in 20 minutes, I taught him like, 2 years worth of math. And he was like, oh, so it's like this. So it's like that. Okay, I got it. He was interested. He was willing to learn, and he
Yeah.
got it like that. If I had been trying to like force him to learn math, it would have been endless worksheets for how many years? I'm sorry, that's wasted time. They could be playing video games or running around in the backyard or doing any other thing that, that they're more attuned and interested and heart led to following their passions, and that is where the most important learning happens, I think.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. When they want to learn and they're motivated to do it. And yeah, I mean, my son learns things all the time and is teaching me things that he keeps asking me about air currents recently. Like,
Oh, fun.
and why, do you know why the air currents do this or that? And he knows the answers. He's asking me questions and I can't always answer, but he knows the answer.
And you can learn things
And we can look
together.
it up. And yeah.
Exactly. I learned so many fun things because of my kids' interests, asking me, hey, search this up for me, or like, do we have a book on this or whatever? And yeah, and sometimes like my youngest just happens to have that harmonic brain where it's like music and logic and numbers that make sense to him. And
Mhm.
so we'll be doing a thing, and he'll have done the numbers in his head and tell us the answer before it's like shown up on the video we're watching or whatever. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that would probably be perceived as a limitation and or annoying if he was in school, right? They'd be like, we're not at that level yet, stop. And yeah, to be free of those judgments and restrictions, I think is like, it's a gift that kids don't realize they're being given, and
Yes. Yes.
like for instance, my oldest, I think he had some time where he was like, man, I wish I wasn't homeschooled. This is dumb. This is like, I'm dumb. I don't know the things I need to know. But now that he's in college and he's 23, he's like, no, I get it. This has been good.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, they find their opposites, right? So like his girlfriend of 3 years is very well schooled and very, like from a type A type of family. And the contrast between them is just fascinating. I remember he was like, so like, what are your fandoms? What are you into? And she's like, what's a fandom? Because she has been so nose to the grindstone, like studying, getting her degree, getting her certifications. She
Mm-hmm.
didn't really have any hobbies. And so like now they're exploring new hobbies together and stuff. And I'm like, that's really, that's important. And there's value in that, you know, you can't get back those years. Like my teen years were horrible. I don't know about anybody else's. People reminisce about high school. I'm like, thank God that's over.
But
And it
yeah,
wasn't
no,
just
no,
it
you
wasn't
can't get back that time. And that's why, like, yeah, when my son has interest in school and I like consider the possibility of him, like when I say trying it out, I mean like he could go for like a month or something just to
yeah,
experience it. But
yeah,
like you said, and even that, I don't right now, I wouldn't send him to school. Like I don't feel like it's a safe place for him to be, sort of like you're saying,
right.
even elementary school. Like you don't know all these strangers around your children that you
Yeah.
don't know and you're not with, and I don't know, it doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah. And it's funny too, like kids' perspectives are so different. Um, I remember my daughter, who's 20 now, I remember her being like 9 or something. And like again, she's got friends that are schooled, her cousin went to school, da, da, da. And I don't know how we got in the conversation about like, oh, would you ever want to go to school? And she's like, absolutely not. There are school shootings all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, that wasn't even on my radar as a longtime homeschooler, I mean, yes, it's on my radar like nationally, but I didn't realize it was on like my tiny child's radar,
Mm-hmm.
and that was her main thing. And she still says that, like, if I ever have a kid, they're never going to school because like schools are not safe. And
Yeah.
I'm like, huh, okay, that's, you know, not my first reason, but definitely on the list,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but, yeah, just it goes to show like there's so many different perspectives on that kind of stuff. And then I think also that helping kids recognize that they're learning, that this is, what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they're 5, they're not so like they're not as self-aware in terms of the input and the judgment of other people. But between 5 and 10, I think, is where they start internalizing, oh, grandma doesn't like that, I don't go to school or whatever. And then
Yeah.
they'll come up with stories around it, or
Mm-hmm.
they'll see stuff on television or in books or whatever, and they're like um judging themselves or questioning themselves. And I think that's the time when we have to be like, oh, see, that thing that you just did that was really cool and easy and fun, kids aren't allowed to do that in school. Or kids aren't, kids don't have the time to explore this and this, for instance. Like I don't know, just some of the hobbies that my kids get into, they would never have time for that if they were in school. Like, never. My daughter is a digital artist. And I'm talking, she knows how to do stuff on with an iPad, with Procreate. There are like entrepreneurs who pay people lots of money to teach them how to do these skills. And she's figured it out herself. But her average time that she spends in a drawing is like 20 hours.
Wow.
She makes like a piece of work. She invests that level of
Yes.
time. And I'm like, honey, you have a level of mastery in terms of, like that 10,000 hour concept where like,
Yeah.
where are you going to get the 10,000 hours? And if you're stuck in school until you're like 18 or 22 or 26 or whatever it is, right? Um, I think so many people are so well schooled that they get the master's degree because they don't know what to do with themselves if they're not in school.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like, well, to break out on one's own and do a thing unstructured is like foreign territory, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, and there's so much like people find their self-worth and value in the amount of school that they do or that they're in schooling or the job that they're doing because
With the
they did
A's.
schooling.
Yeah.
And yet like we have inherent value within zero school. Like, but the culture
Exactly.
doesn't always reflect that and mirror that back to us.
Yeah. I feel like it's very, we've been all of us have been raised in this very masculine oriented society. It's measurable, it's quantifiable, it's like black and white, objective. And I mean, for my kids are, my 10-year-old is more emotionally intelligent than like plenty of adults I've met, you know? And I think it's because we're not spending so much time on achievement and so much time disconnected. I saw a chart recently and it was showing the number of hours on average that you spend with your children or parents over time. And I'm like, we spend so much more time than that together. Like we have rich, diverse, interesting conversations all the time, especially as they're getting older, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, my adult kids will come home and they'll hang out and they spend time in conversation with me, with my husband, with their siblings. They are, connected at a level that I don't think is possible if everybody is spending the majority of their waking hours apart and separated and told what to focus on. Like, no, don't look out the window. This is what's important. And who's to say if that's, even true? Because as you said, like we spent plenty of time learning things that have zero bearing on our lives now.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were a lot of gaps.
Yeah, I mean, and they continue to, push certain agendas in school
Oh
and
yeah.
teach children things that aren't factual. I mean, like we didn't talk about this. If it's a hot topic that you don't want to talk about, we don't have to talk
Okay.
about it. But like,
I'm open.
the transgender ideology that's taught to kids in school that you can be a boy or a girl when really biologically you are a male or a female,
Yeah.
and you can dress like the opposite sex and call yourself the another name, but it doesn't
Yeah.
actually make you transition or transform from a male to a
Yeah.
female or a female to a male. Like that is not possible.
Well, it's so fascinating to me that on top of that layer is the layer that school teachers and counselors have taken it upon themselves to feel like it is their role to allow these kids to do this and hide it from their parents. And that's the part. So, like, you can have this completely crafted identity at school and have it be explicitly, overtly a thing. Don't tell my parents. And they're like, yes, we have to protect the child from their parents. And that
Wow.
is super creepy to me because I mean, for instance, legally speaking, when you send your child to the school is their guardian. So like any school personnel that, if there's some kind of crazy emergency or something happens, they have the authority to do whatever it is, unless you explicitly say don't do that. And there's a lot. Like I remember my parents, and I grew up with corporal punishment. But my parents, I remember them sending notices to the school saying, we do not consent for her to be spanked, because spanking was still a thing in Texas public schools when I was a kid. I reckon it still is. I don't know. Probably much less common because the social climate has shifted. I know it's still a thing in like Louisiana. We have friends over there that's still a thing. And so it's like, how much autonomy are you really giving up? Because of course, just people send their kids to school. It's just the thing you do. Of course you do. You have to trust other adults. And it's like, well, yes, but I would prefer the other adults to be ones that I've built a relationship with over time, that I know, that I trust, that we know each other's hearts, and it's a mutual thing, not just whatever random person that the school hires, yeah, that's so my kids have perhaps less exposure to adults overall than they would if they were like in the school system, but the adults that they know, they really deeply know them. And I feel like that it creates maybe it creates art inflated expectations of their relationships, because they're looking for that quality, right? They're looking for depth instead of just breadth in relationships. but I feel like that's a good thing overall. Like I've heard all of my kids at various times lament like, oh, I wish I had like more friends. And then when we really dig into it, what they mean is better friends, deeper relationships with their friends.
Mm.
And I didn't learn how to cultivate that until I was in my 20s. I don't know about you, but I did not have, like, I didn't grow up with like really deep, solid friendship connections. I figured that out as an adult, you know?
I don't know. Yeah, I've all as long as I can remember had at least a few like deep friendships.
That's
And
so good.
then it's just they've just grown over the time. Like I'm still friends with my next door neighbor who was 15 months younger than me when I was like when we were
Wow.
babies together, and we're still friends today.
That's amazing. That's so good. That's really nice. And I think too there's a lineage piece in there, right? Like maybe your parents had friendships,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. I think I'm rebuilding that lineage with my family, like learning how to have those good, deep, abiding friendships that last. Um, but in terms of, like I definitely don't, even when I was in my 20s, I didn't talk to anybody from high school. I
Mhm.
mean, it was just they were just the people that were there, and I didn't really have like I never had and maybe that's part of me wanting to homeschool and wanting, because I never really had like a great high school experience. I didn't have like a friend group that was like, ride or die type. Like I've never had that in school. I was always just kind of, everybody knew me and I knew everybody, and then there wasn't any depth. And I was like, eh.
Yeah. Well, like your son, I'm a Scorpio and I have a tendency to just like go to the depths with
Depth or
people.
nothing. Yeah. I
So,
know a lot of Scorpios. Yeah. I have two Scorpio sons. My husband's best friend is a Scorpio. Our two best friends are Scorpio. There's a lot of Scorpios. Yeah. Maybe
and
that's the thing.
and my son is a Capricorn, so it's funny to hear you mention that you're a Capricorn.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I love to nerd out with astrology and human design, the Enneagram, all that kind of stuff. Very, very helpful in terms of knowing what our default settings are, is
Mhm.
how I like to frame it. Um, but yeah, I mean, even that, like my kids know, like they know their astrology, and they know like they have so much diverse random type knowledge on so many different topics. My youngest could tell you about composting. I mean, he could like talk a blue streak about like, well, this is how it breaks down and you need green matter and brown matter, and like he can explain all that because my husband's really into gardening, and so it's just what we do, you know. And I think that's the other thing too, like it it comes down to being an engaged, active, curious adult, and then your kids are just along for that ride. My kids don't love gardening. Well, my 20-year-old's like obsessed with succulents, but house plants, right? It's
Yeah.
different than like food gardening. And I would say that none of my kids love gardening, but they know about it.
Uh-huh.
They maybe know more about it than they even think they do. Maybe they could
Totally.
even, you know like I remember them laughing and laughing because like one of their friends didn't realize that ketchup came from tomatoes, and they were just like flabbergasted that somebody couldn't
Ah,
know this. They're like, we have grown tomatoes and turned it in, boiled it down and turned it into homemade ketchup, and like, what do you think it comes from?
yeah. That's so interesting, the disconnect. Yeah. My kids, yeah, they love planting seeds and watering and picking the food. And like, I love
Yeah.
cooking like fresh herbs from the garden. And
Yep.
they always love like helping me like cut the herbs. And they can identify so many, more than I could at that age. Like, I've only learned to identify them as an adult. And
Exactly.
we make our own soap and bath
That's so cool.
bombs and herbal body oils and salves. And it's, yeah, fun to involve them in that process, and that they know,
Hmm.
like, oh, yes, we cut this lavender from grandma's, she has a bunch of lavender, and they've like
Aw,
seen me cut it up and seen it,
that's amazing.
in the
Yeah.
jar infusing. And then they've
Yep.
been witness and assisted with the process.
That's so cool. I feel like that is like bone deep knowledge. That's not just the superficial cerebral. I picked it up from this class or that book or whatever. that sticks with us. And, it's not always quantifiable, right? I think
Mm-mm.
so. For instance, you're in Washington and maybe there's more hoops. I don't know offhand, but maybe you've got to like provide transcripts or something. So
Mm-hmm.
much of this kind of stuff is translating the richness and the depth and like the meat of what we do all day and putting it, through this filter of school speak, right? So
Yeah.
like what you just described, that's like, that's science and, life science and biology,
Chemistry.
soil, whatever. Like
Yeah.
you can make up the words because that's really all that anybody is doing, is making up words around practical, real things. And I think that when we turn it all on its head and we're teaching, we come up with these standardized tests, for instance, and then we've got to teach to get them to pass the specifics that are on the test.
Yeah.
There is no groundedness in terms of where and when will I encounter needing to know these things in real life, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um, for like, so my husband's a plumber, and my 15-year-old will go and apprentice with him because in Texas you're allowed to do that. If you're self-employed, you can have an apprentice. Apprenticeship is a lost art. I remember
Yes.
wishing that there were apprenticeships because I
Mm-hmm.
really think like teenagers get a bad rap. I think that they are curious and motivated and like chomping at the bit to do something real,
Yeah.
and society does not allow them access to almost any of it. And then they're treated, they're treated like children, like children, like children, until they hit the magical age of 18. And then it's like, so sign here for your incredibly expensive student loans, and or join the military, and or like
Mm-hmm.
go
Get a
make adult
credit
decisions
card or
now.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, get in debt, buy a car, do you can have it all now that you're 18. Oh, but you can't drink. Anyway, my husband's European. He thinks that's hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah.
In Germany, you can drink a full 5 years before you get your driver's license, and
And
in his opinion,
most
that
people
makes
drink even younger than that. Like I was in, France for a year, and it's just like, part of their culture, and it's normal that kids
exactly
of your ages are having sips of drinks, and it's not
right.
a big deal.
And it's a sip, and it's a
Yeah,
flavor, and it's a let's see if it pairs well with this meal, not let's pound a few and get
right.
smashed or whatever. Like
Yeah.
that's not part of. I don't think that's really part of European culture,
Mm,
and
no.
that's yeah. There's so many layers to it, right? There's so many, and I think that part of the party culture is they're seeking for like there's this desperation of I want to feel something real, and they're looking for it, and
Yeah.
um they don't know how to get it from regular things because they haven't been introduced to regular things. They're not allowed to like participate in life. They're locked up in these school buildings and told to look at artificial things and artificial math problems and da da da. I mean,
Mm,
you want to teach a kid math, let him help you, renovate the shed or something,
yeah.
or help that, they want to redecorate the
Mm,
kitchen or something and involve them in that project. And they'll be asking you a million questions. And yes, it will distract you and it will probably make you have to remeasure and stuff, but that is, that's the process, and you're learning with them. And they're learning that it's not just, area equals length times width as an abstract concept, but we
mhm.
need to make sure we buy the appropriate amount of, flooring for this room or whatever.
Yes.
And it makes much more sense to want to learn math if it has this very practical application of I want to get the thing done that I want to do.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
like I
You
had my kids. Mhm.
I was just gonna say that you speaking about like the structure of the standardized test and how like then you have to like teach them the skills to get the test. And
Yeah,
it made me also think about like that crossover into the medical system where like they create these tests so that then they can like
they're brutal
tell
tests.
you that you're like meeting the expectation or you're not. And that then they use that in a way like against you to um say that then you have to do this intervention in the language that they use within the medical system, like that you have to, and they don't give you
Yeah,
alternatives. They don't tell you the benefits and the risks. They don't
exactly.
like tell you you don't have to make a decision right now. It's very much like in the school system where there's like the system of power and they're like in this well, we perceive it as this powerful position, and it is in some ways, but we also have the ability to like say no or not go to them or walk out a lot
Yeah.
of the time. Not all the time, but yeah.
I think I figured out so much about personal consent and autonomy, like in my own life, as an extension of when I was working with clients as a doula. So
Uh-huh.
I was probably, let's see, I mean, I attended my first birth 2009 or something.
Mhm.
And I worked intensely as a doula for about 2.5 years. And I mean, intensely. I was with a collective, and it was very much like, you were supposed to not be on call a lot, but it was lots of being on call.
Mhm.
And so very often I would not meet these women until they were in labor, and I'd show up at the hospital and, hi, I'm your doula. It was very, there wasn't a lot of time to build a rapport, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, overall, individually, their births, they were pleased and everything was fine, but there was a lot of just um mitigating the harm that was, that there's harm inherent in the system, and you just kind of you're there to hold their hand and make them feel, a little bit better about the harm that's happening, rather than preventing it or changing it or
Mhm.
shifting the process in any significant
And
way.
as a doula, you're not allowed to really do
Exactly.
much of anything. And like if you speak up, like they will potentially throw you out of the room.
I always walk that line, mostly with grace, because I was asked to be a doula before I learned about doula as the profession. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
I was just asked to attend a friend's birth because they're like, you have 3 kids already, like, I need your help. And it came from a place of, they were fearful, they didn't want to be there, and they knew it, and they knew that they were hoping that I could be like a buffer. And so I really went into it with a very different thing than perhaps a doula who, I mean, there's so many doulas who either they've only had surgical birth, or they don't have children, that they've been through the traditional training, and it's very um what's the word, well, they don't really know that there could be another way
Mhm.
other than just, I'm here to help you deal with what the hospital wants you to put up with.
And I mean, it's incredibly bizarre how normalized like the violence in birth, like the obstetrical rape and violence that occurs in birth has been like so
Absolutely.
normalized that it blows my mind. And this
Yeah.
time when we're like the most vulnerable, like, and we should be like honored and held and revered and like be the person in power in the room, and yet women are being violated, babies are being violated. Like
Yeah.
I have mostly witnessed births in birth center and home midwife attended
Mhm.
births, but even I mean there was some of that there, but like when I have transferred with clients to the hospital, like I'm thinking of like the last hospital birth I have witnessed was a home birth transfer, and
Hard.
and I mean,
Because
not all of it, but like the part that really struck me was the abuse on the baby. Like that when the baby was born, they were vigorous, breathing, and yet they still were aggressively like handling the baby and shoving like that silicone thing down their throat and up their nose. Like
yep.
you're like orally like I mean these first
Yeah.
moments of these babies' lives, and then they're being like abused and raped in their mouth, and it
Yep.
ugh.
There's so I used to write for this couple. There are a couple of PhD researchers on pre-birth and interlife consciousness. I don't know if you've come across their work. They have a book called Cosmic Cradle and a book called Babies Are Cosmic.
No.
And that's pretty much the focus of their work, is that these are conscious beings from the moment, I mean, really even preconception, because who's to say where or what, like, and this is, far beyond the confines of any kind of like abortion pro, whatever. Like, it's just like consciousness is.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if there's a brain to hold it yet or not. There's,
Yeah.
and so what they've done is collected up thousands and thousands of accounts of people who remember their the circumstances of their birth or even their conception, or like things that happened to their parents before they were even thought of. And, there's a lot of weight put on things like circumcision and routine infant procedures, and how, for instance, the work of Frederick Le Boyer, with the water baths and, dim lighting and all of that. And how I don't know why it should be such a radical concept to treat this brand new precious thing as a brand new precious thing.
Yes, I mean, there's no other mammal that we're like, when a cat is giving birth, or like animals in the zoo or in the wild, like they know to like stay away and not touch them.
Exactly.
And allow the mother to like welcome their baby and to, give them whatever gentle stimulation that feels good to that mom, not like aggressively harming them.
I feel like that in Women Who Run with the Wolves, they talk about being instinct injured. And I feel like that it's almost like that ritual of dehumanization at birth is like it's the continuation of that process. Like our instincts are injured as mothers, and then we have this violence done to us at our very first moments of life. And our mother is already instinct injured and does not feel empowered to protect us, to lash out, because we're not supposed to be disagreeable, right? You don't want to upset the doctors. And and it's really so ridiculous when you think about it, right? Like, who in the world is more important in that room at the moment of birth than mother and baby? And that's really like what mama says ought to be law. But we are so socialized to think of ourselves as hopeless and hapless and stupid and not capable, and
not knowing what's right or best for our baby, or not knowing if they're okay or not, that we have to look for someone else to tell us if they are.
Look at the machine. Did it beep? Are we safe?
And I think about the energy of those people in the room, because you can feel the energy, because they want the baby to live or whatever. And most babies, I mean, like, this baby that I'm speaking to, he was totally fine. And yet the energy was still like they're doing these things to the baby with fear in their energy. They're not doing it with love and tenderness.
Exactly. I feel like that was maybe the most significant birth that I ever attended was a baby who took about 4 minutes to arrive fully in their body. And 4 minutes that I like, there is still this palpable awareness of mom and dad are over here, baby's over there with a bunch of personnel doing all kinds of things, and it's across the room, bright lights, everything.
And they've already cut his cord and like,
absolutely,
separated.
We had to. We know you wanted to do the delayed cord clamping and all these other skin to skin, but all that's out the window now.
We're just gonna cut off their oxygen supply instead, and then try and get it back over here. So
because it's more practical to have the baby in the heated bassinet over there on anyway, but just those 4 minutes of stretching of time. And I felt like I remember thinking like, it's down to me to be the presence of love and positivity and like trust in this room at the moment, because the parents are looking to me going, is everything okay? Because I'm the professional doula, right? And so and then I'm looking there and I'm seeing what they're doing, and I mean, everything was fine in the end, but it was like just this real awareness of like, wow, these folks over there are so concerned with the practical aspects of what they're doing that they have zero left over for reassuring mom and dad that their baby is okay or going to be okay or anything. It was just me and the parents. Like everybody completely was focused. Yeah.
Well, the fear around death itself that, I feel like we're in a place in this culture where it's like death is unacceptable at any age, but especially when you're a babies. And yet, I mean, but babies do die, and it is part of the normal like spectrum of life, that not all beings that come into a body are here to live into their 90s.
Yeah.
We're just not. And if we can like honor the process of dying and death too,
Exactly.
like,
We've turned it all antiseptic, you know. They used to have like a wake and a mourning, and the person who had passed would be here in the household and, you know, wrapped and anointed and honored and talked to. And
mhm,
uh death has become such a horrible
medicalized.
disconnect specter, right?
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what.
it's become a medicalized event, the same way birth
Yeah.
has. Like, people aren't having physiological births very often right now in the United States. People are also not having physiological deaths. They're highly medicated, highly intervened upon,
Yeah.
and it's happening outside of people's homes.
Yeah. Yeah. I I am, I suppose, fortunate. I've never had the loss of one of my children. I have never experienced a miscarriage, but um I used to work a lot with the spiritual and emotional aspects, impacts of either miscarriage and or abortion, and, you know, holding that space for women. And there's, it's like it's the ultimate taboo in a way. Like, people, society does not give space for mothers to mourn. uh and there, it seems like they just want to look for solutions and reasons why, and, you know, put it in boxes and
And place
organize it
blame.
out. And then some things are just, they suck and they hurt. And, you know, our task is not to fix it or erase it, but to just to
Mhm.
abide with it, and to, you know.
Yeah, death is there like darkness is there. I mean, each 24-hour period shows us that like the light and dark both exist, and
Yeah.
they're both real experiences and valid and good. And yeah, I had my first birth was an early birth, and after I'd been waiting, like wanting to have babies my whole life, my first birth was an early birth. And then my next daughter, she didn't have kidneys. And so I found out when I was 6 months pregnant with her that she didn't have kidneys, and I carried her until she was ready to be born. And I birthed her, and she was alive for a few moments and then, died in my arms. And so but
Oh, wow. I can't even imagine, like, the levels of heartbreak and heart openness that something like that must bring to you.
mhm. Yeah.
I mean,
It,
yeah.
I mean, her death, her life and her death, and I still mother her in a different way in spirit.
Yes.
I'll always
Yes.
be her mom, and I feel her
Exactly.
presence.
I
And,
love that. I'm so
and
glad that you're connected like that.
yeah, and for me, I had also had like my first big like initiation into the death world was when I was 25 years old, and my first love, and he died.
Oh,
He had
God.
cancer, and I was there with him. His mom and I were there when he took his last breaths. And that was like my first big like awareness of like death and this other aspect. And also, I didn't even know the word mediumship, or, like I grew up in a family that wasn't religious or
Oh, okay.
spiritual either. And so,
Oh, interesting. So
but
just
but that
him.
palpable experience of witnessing him with, embodied and breath, and then witnessing the breath cease, and the felt the soul leave, and then
Yeah.
also felt his presence, not in the body, but felt his soul's presence around me after he had died, when he was in
Yeah.
spirit, when he's in spirit, like now. That was the first time that I, yeah, really just life taught me about death in that way in my 20s, when I was much younger than, like most of my peers didn't have a
Right.
relationship with death at that time.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's big and heavy. Yeah. My so my parents were on the older side when, so my mom was 40 almost 41 when I was born, and I'm the only child of only children, right? So I remember thinking very practically at, 5 years old, like I better hurry up and have children because otherwise they won't meet their grandparents, like just doing
Aw.
the math as a little kid.
Yeah.
Um, and then my grandparents, let's see, my mother's mom and dad and my father's mom all lived with us for a good while. Like pretty much that ended my childhood because my home became like, very much a nursing home for a while. My
Mhm.
mom was a caretaker. It was rough. It was hard. And my grandpa actually did not pass until I was expecting my first child. I was 17. I was asleep on the couch. I was, pregnant, doing that whole, early pregnancy, fall asleep a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and I woke up and I the best way I can explain it is it was as if a gunshot went off, but it was like I felt the
Mm.
gunshot. Does that
Mhm.
make sense? And
Mhm.
I woke up from this nap with this very clear awareness, and I was like, Mom, you need to go check on your dad. And he had passed, right?
Mhm.
And but it was like my grandparents were already like they didn't know that they'd lost their faculties already mentally. Like they didn't know who I was. I didn't have like a deep relationship with them because by the time I was old enough to know who they were, they didn't know who I was anymore.
Yeah.
And so really I didn't really have much experience with death. So my husband's mother passed away quite young the year that me and him got together. And so
Mhm.
that was and he was quite young. I was 25 and he was 19 when we got together. Um so that was, for him very hard and very heavy, obviously. And then my mama passed away about, you know, 12 years ago now. And so she it's like her passing away made me less fearful of death because beliefs like regardless of what they were or are or she's here. She hangs out with me, she visits me in my dreams, she gives me signs, she shows up. We have so much to talk about, and it's so real and visceral. And like even if I had had very different, beliefs objectively about that kind of stuff, the lived experience of, that I have this continuation that like
Mm.
my mom's not gone. I can probably talk with her more easily now because there's not that weird filter of like
You don't have to pick
her.
up a phone or
Right.
yeah.
Well, and she, my mom wanted to be supportive, but we had a lot of differences in our views on things. My mom was so I grew up listening to psychics because my mom listened to psychics, even though she was a fallen away Catholic. And this was,
Wow.
she had a lot of stuff that she couldn't let go of. There was a lot of like evil and bad and wrong and like sinful. These were things that were in her consciousness and weighing heavily on her, especially when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
But also she listened to psychics after they died because she needed that closure. Like after her mom passed away,
Yeah.
after her dad passed away, she needed to hear these stories from mediums who, that they went on. And I think that was partially because she was so shut down in her own ability or willingness to experience it herself, because I
Mm-hmm.
think, she was fearful, right? Like the overlays of what the church or whatever, like so many overlays had her shut down her innate knowing. But I was raised without religion, and I think that remains one of the most amazing gifts, I think, because I'm a very spiritual person, but I do not have these I don't have any dogma around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or very, I suppose we all have dogma. I have less dogma
Yeah.
than perhaps someone who was raised in, say a Southern Baptist or a traditional Catholic or whatever household.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I feel like I have an ancestor altar up, and but it's like it's just I have pictures of my mom and things like that, and we talk. And I feel like the kids are seeing this as like it can be easeful, and it can be, not frightening. we were just talking ghost stories the other day with a friend of mine and her teenage daughter, and we were all talking about, and my friend was saying that she was really like ghost stories and stuff really scare her, and I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, but you can just talk with them. It's okay. Like, I realized maybe I have a different perspective about that kind of stuff, in part because of all of the, we don't always see the ocean that we're swimming in, so to speak, of the beliefs we've been raised with and whatnot.
Yeah. Sophie Brock, she has this podcast called The Good Enough Mother, and she talks about like a fish tank, that like we're swimming in a fish tank, and some fish know that it exists, but some fish
Yeah,
and yet we're
that's just the
all
ocean.
we're all born into a culture that's, different around the world, but
Yeah,
that we're all within it and participants in it.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I know that's another point of, I suppose, another step toward exiting the matrix, quote unquote. Like, because my kids are at the age now where these topics will come up with their friends, and they're like, so like, what religion would you say we are? And I'm like, oh honey, we're not, we don't have a religion. And
Yeah.
like, there's a quiz online called the Belief-O-Matic, and I think it's BeliefNet, and it's actually a really fun tool to go through, because it asks you, what do you naturally believe? And then like it sorts your answers into, well, these are some of the religious views that your beliefs align with. And it's kind of fun and funny to,
Yeah.
see it broken down that way. And so like my kids have taken that quiz and been like, oh, well, I'm this and this. And we're very much a nature spirituality type of household. That's just our flow with things. And I think there is some kind of stereotype, especially it's like everybody thinks that secular and spiritual, not religious, mean the same thing, but they really don't. Like, yeah. Not to me anyway. Like, I know people equate, for instance, paganism with like all sorts of things like polyamory and whatnot, and it's like, no, not necessarily. No, we're pretty traditional in our values in a lot of ways, except we just don't happen to go to a Christian church. So
yeah,
that seems to confuse some folks. And yeah, my kids are just like, so what do we say? I'm like, you could say whatever you want.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, there's like that being okay with other people not being able to put us in a box.
mm-hmm.
And, sometimes making people uncomfortable by the choices that I make. I have been becoming more comfortable with making people uncomfortable. Not that I'm like trying to, but just by being who I am and the choices that I'm making.
I no longer hide my goddess statues when people come over my house.
Yeah.
I used to do that. I used to hide my oracle cards and whatever.
Yeah.
And now I figure, if people come over and they're alarmed by the things on my bookshelf, well, that saves me some time. They're, no use trying to build this lovely friendship with someone who is gonna like find out that, like, better to just get those things out of the way early on, that, oh, we're just not aligned. That's cool. Like, no hard feelings.
Totally.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like our time's kind of coming to a close. Do you feel like there's anything else we want to try and chat about before we stop recording?
I think we've covered an awful lot here. We've got the school piece. We didn't really talk much about birth, which is funny because that's like the initial connect. Yeah, and then I think I'm feeling complete.
Beautiful. All right. Well, then I will stop. Thank you for tuning in today to the Heart of the Soul. If you love the podcast, I would be so grateful if you would choose to subscribe, rate, review, or share the show. If you feel aligned with me and my energy and are wanting to unearth your wild inner knowing, birth your baby wild and free, navigate the medical system, move through grief, receive an intuitive mediumship reading, or debrief about a traumatic birth experience, I support women just like you all over the world. This is absolutely my soul's work and calling in life, to support and encourage other women from womb to tomb. I have witnessed women claim their wild, place new boundaries with loved ones, and live more fully unto themselves through my time supporting them. I believe women claiming their sovereignty and remembering their wild will truly transform the world. Because of this, it is within my personal values to make this support as accessible as possible to all women that seek this for themselves. And this is why I have payment plans, partial scholarships, and I'm also very open to creative forms of reciprocity. To learn more or book your free connection call, go to my website, www.birthingnova.love. I would love to connect with you. Until next time, remember to be brave, be loved, be wild, be you, and be the change that you seek for yourself and for the generations to come.